Have you ever had someone in your family try to control every single aspect of your life, even when it had absolutely nothing to do with them? Well, let me tell you about my sister-in-law Rebecca and how she nearly destroyed our entire family over something as simple as a tattoo. I still remember that phone call 9 months ago like it was yesterday. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. And when I heard the judge read that verdict in court, watching Rebecca collapse right there on the courtroom floor, part of me felt vindicated. But another part just felt sad about how far things had gone. You see, I've been a tattoo artist for almost 20 years now, working out of my little shop in Seattle. It's not much to look at from the outside, just a small storefront wedged between a coffee shop and a vintage bookstore. But inside, the walls are covered with thousands of designs, each one telling someone's story. I've always been what my family considered the black sheep, the one who took a different path. While my brother Daniel went to business school and got his MBA, I was apprenticing at tattoo parlors, learning how to turn skin into canvas. My arms are covered in ink, each piece marking a different chapter of my life. From the rose I got at 18 to remember my grandmother, to the intricate sleeve I finished last year depicting the Pacific Northwest landscape I love so much. Daniel never understood it. He'd look at my tattoos with this expression somewhere between confusion and disgust, like he couldn't fathom why anyone would choose to mark their body permanently. But it wasn't until he married Rebecca that things really got bad. Rebecca was one of those people who always had to have an opinion about everything and everyone. The kind of woman who would tell children their artwork wasn't good enough at school art shows, who would criticize the flowers at funerals for not being fresh enough. She once told me at a family barbecue that she'd rather die than have anyone in her family look like me. I remember standing there holding my potato salad, watching her nose wrinkle as she looked at the phoenix tattoo on my forearm, and thinking that one day this woman was going to cause real problems. The thing about Rebecca was that she wrapped all her judgment and control in this veneer of concern and religious righteousness. She was heavily involved in her church, ran 3 different committees, organized all the fundraisers, and somehow managed to make everyone feel like they weren't quite living up to her standards. She had this way of making comments that sounded caring on the surface, but were actually deeply cruel. Like when she told our mother that she was praying for her to find more age-appropriate clothing, or when she mentioned to Daniel's coworker's wife that she was hosting a weight loss support group that might help her. Their daughter Lily was different, though. From the time she was little, she had this spark of creativity that Rebecca seemed determined to extinguish. I remember when Lily was 8 and drew this incredible picture of a mermaid with rainbow scales, and Rebecca took one look at it and said mermaids weren't real, and she should focus on drawing things from the Bible instead. The light in that little girl's eyes dimmed just a bit that day, and it broke my heart. Over the years, I watched Rebecca systematically crush every creative impulse Lily had. No to the drama club because actors were morally suspect. No to the art classes because they were a waste of time. No to the creative writing workshop because fiction was just lies dressed up pretty. But Lily found ways to keep that creative spark alive. She'd sneak over to my apartment when Rebecca thought she was at Bible study, and we'd spend hours looking through my art books, talking about different styles and techniques. She'd show me poems she'd written in secret, stories she'd hidden under her mattress. I became her safe space, the one adult in her life who told her that her creativity was a gift, not something to be ashamed of. Rebecca knew Lily spent time with me, but she tolerated it because family was family, even if she made it clear she disapproved. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments at family dinners about how some people were bad influences, looking directly at me while she said it. Everything changed when Lily's best friend Jake died in a car accident. They'd been inseparable since middle school, the kind of friendship that comes along once in a lifetime. Jake was this brilliant, funny kid who wanted to be a filmmaker. He and Lily would make these little movies on their phones, writing scripts and doing all the voices. Rebecca hated Jake, said he was distracting Lily from her studies and her faith. She'd forbidden Lily from seeing him outside of school. But of course, teenagers find ways around rules like that. The night Jake died, he'd been driving home from a film festival, screening in Portland, where one of their short films had been selected. Lily was supposed to be with him, but Rebecca had grounded her for getting a B+ in chemistry. The guilt nearly destroyed Lily. She blamed herself for not being there, convinced that if she'd been in the car, maybe she could have grabbed the wheel or called out a warning or something. Anything to change what happened. Rebecca's response to her daughter's grief was to double down on the control. She took Lily's phone, monitored all her communications, and told her that Jake's death was God's way of showing her what happened when you didn't follow the righteous path. I'll never forget Lily showing up at my shop 3 weeks after the funeral, tears streaming down her face, begging me to help her find a way to honor Jake's memory that her mother couldn't take away. That's when she told me about the tattoo she'd been designing. She and Jake had drawn it together years ago. A simple heart with the infinity symbol worked into it, representing their promise to be friends forever. She'd been adding to it since his death, incorporating the date and some film reel imagery. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and absolutely perfect. I told her to come back when she turned 18 and we'd make it happen. The morning of Lily's 18th birthday, she was the first customer through my door. She'd told Rebecca she was going to early morning prayer service, but instead, she came to my shop with cash she'd been saving for months working secret tutoring jobs. Her hands shook a little as she filled out the consent forms, but her voice was steady when she said she needed to do this, needed to carry a piece of Jake with her always. I spent extra time on that tattoo, making sure every line was perfect, every detail exactly as she'd drawn it. We placed it on her upper arm where she could see it but also hide it under sleeves if needed. She tried to pay full price, but I only charged her for supplies. This was about more than money. It was about helping my niece reclaim a piece of herself that grief and her mother's control had tried to steal. As she looked at the finished piece in the mirror, tears rolling down her cheeks, she whispered thank you to Jake and then hugged me tighter than she ever had before. I gave her detailed aftercare instructions and sent her on her way, knowing there would be hell to pay when Rebecca found out, but hoping Lily could keep it hidden for a while. I underestimated Rebecca's vigilance. Not even 30 minutes later, my phone exploded with her call. Apparently, Lily had gone home to change the bandage, and Rebecca had walked in without knocking, catching sight of the fresh tattoo. The scream that came through my phone was so loud, I had to hold it away from my ear. She was shrieking about infection and defilement, and how I'd marked her baby for life. I tried to explain calmly that Lily was 18, that she'd wanted this tattoo to honor her friend, that everything was completely legal and consensual. But Rebecca wasn't interested in facts or logic. She told me I'd infected her daughter with my wickedness, and that I would pay for what I'd done, then hung up on me. Within an hour, she'd sent a message to our entire extended family group text, complete with photos of Lily's tattoo that she'd apparently forced her to let her take. The messages started pouring in immediately. Our mother said she was ashamed of me for corrupting Lily. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my life choices. Aunts who'd never seemed to mind my tattoos before were now acting like I'd committed some grievous sin. Daniel called me directly, and I could hear Rebecca screaming in the background as he tried to mediate. When I pointed out repeatedly that Lily was a legal adult who had made her own choice, Rebecca grabbed the phone and screamed that Lily wasn't really an adult, just a girl who couldn't see the bigger picture. And as her mother, she knew what was best. The family dinner that Sunday was a disaster waiting to happen. I'd gone back and forth about whether to attend, but ultimately decided I needed to be there for Lily. I pulled up to Daniel and Rebecca's house, the same perfectly manicured colonial where every blade of grass was exactly the right height and the flowers were arranged with mathematical precision. Before I could even ring the doorbell, Rebecca flung the door open, blocking the entrance with her body. Her face was twisted with such rage that for a moment I didn't even recognize her. She stood there in her church dress, arms crossed, looking at me like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. The words that came out of her mouth were venomous. I wasn't welcome in her home until I personally removed Lily's tattoo, she said, as if I could just magic it away. When I tried to explain that tattoo artists don't do removals, that it's an entirely different process involving lasers and dermatologists, she got even angrier. Fine, she spat. Then I'd be paying for every single removal session until every trace of my influence was erased from her daughter's body. I could see Lily standing behind her mother in the hallway, her face a mixture of embarrassment and defeat. When Lily tried to speak up, tried to explain that the tattoo was for Jake, and it meant something to her, Rebecca whirled around with such fury that Lily actually stepped back. The words Rebecca said next will haunt me forever. She told Lily that Jake would be ashamed of her for defiling her body like this, that he was probably glad he couldn't see what she'd become. The look on Lily's face was like watching someone's heart shatter in real time. I moved forward, ready to push past Rebecca and comfort my niece, but she slammed the door in my face with such force that the wreath fell off. I stood there on that perfect porch, listening to Rebecca screaming at Lily inside, calling her ungrateful and stupid, and saying she'd ruined everything. Daniel's voice was in there too, but weaker, trying to calm things down, but not really standing up to his wife. I sat in my car for a while, texting Lily, but the messages weren't going through. The blue messages had turned green, which meant Rebecca had done something to Lily's phone, probably taken it away entirely. That night, I lay awake thinking about how to help my niece. She was 18 but still financially dependent on her parents, still living under their roof. Rebecca had systematically isolated her over the years, homeschooling her for high school to have more control, limiting her friendships, monitoring every aspect of her life. The next morning, I had an idea. I remembered Lily mentioning that she still had access to her school email from the community college where she was taking classes. I sent her a message there, asking if she was okay and if she wanted to meet. She responded within an hour, saying her mom had taken her phone and her car keys, but she could fake being sick and leave campus early if I could pick her up. When I saw her that afternoon, she looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her shoulders slumped in defeat. She climbed into my car and immediately started crying, saying her mom had kept her up all night, lecturing her about sin and disappointment, and how she'd thrown her life away for some boy who wasn't even alive to care. We drove to a quiet park and talked for hours. Lily told me that Rebecca had gone through her room like a tornado, looking for evidence of other corrupting influences. She'd thrown away Lily's art supplies, her journals, even photos of her and Jake. She'd called the community college and tried to withdraw Lily from her classes, saying she needed to focus on prayer and healing. The control had always been bad, but now it was suffocating. Lily felt like she couldn't breathe in that house anymore. That's when we started making a plan. Lily needed to become independent, but it would take time. She had some money saved from tutoring, but not enough for an apartment. I offered to let her stay with me, but my lease was ending soon, and I was planning to move to Portland for a fresh start. We decided that Lily would keep her head down, continue going to classes, save every penny she could, and work towards getting her own place. I started slipping her money when I could, deposits into a bank account Rebecca didn't know about. It wasn't much, but every little bit helped. Lily was smart about it, keeping up appearances at home, wearing long sleeves everywhere, being the dutiful daughter Rebecca expected. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. Each time we met secretly, she seemed a little more worn down, a little less like herself. Rebecca, meanwhile, had escalated her war against me. She started with social media, crafting posts about how I was a dangerous influence on children, how I had manipulated her innocent daughter into making a permanent mistake. She didn't name me directly at first, just made vague references to family members who couldn't be trusted, who preyed on vulnerable young people. But when that didn't get enough attention, she got more specific. She posted in local Facebook groups, warning parents about predatory tattoo artists who would mark their children without parental consent. She shared photos of my shop, my work, even my personal social media profiles. The comments sections became a battlefield, with some people defending the right of 18-year-olds to make their own choices, while others joined Rebecca's crusade against tattoo artists who corrupted youth. My business started to suffer almost immediately. Parents would call to cancel their appointments, saying they'd heard things about me. New clients would no-show without explanation. My Google reviews got bombed with 1-star ratings from people who'd never set foot in my shop, all parroting Rebecca's talking points about child safety. Then came the call to my licensing board. Rebecca had filed a formal complaint, alleging that I routinely tattooed minors without consent and that I was running some sort of grooming operation out of my shop. The allegations were so outrageous that they should have been dismissed immediately, but the board was required to investigate any complaint involving minors. I had to hire a lawyer, provide years of documentation, submit to interviews. Even though I'd done nothing wrong, the investigation itself was damaging. Other shops in town started distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with the controversy. Through all of this, I kept meeting with Lily when we could manage it. She was 18 now, but still trapped by circumstances. Rebecca had found the bank account I'd been putting money into and had somehow convinced the bank that Lily was mentally incompetent and she needed to be added as a co-signer. Lily had to start over with a new account at a different bank, being even more careful. The stress was affecting her grades, her health, everything. She'd lost weight, wasn't sleeping, and the spark that had already been dimmed by Jake's death seemed in danger of going out entirely. About 2 weeks after the Facebook post started, Lily came to my shop in tears. But this time, they weren't entirely sad tears. She handed me a design she'd been working on since she was 12, a detailed drawing of a shark swimming through ocean waves. She explained that it represented her love of the ocean and marine biology, the career she'd dreamed of before Rebecca had decided science was too secular. It was also a tribute to her favorite movie, Jaws, which she and Jake used to watch together every summer. She looked at me with such determination and said she wanted to get it done, wanted to reclaim another piece of herself that her mother had tried to take away. I should have said no. I knew it would escalate things with Rebecca, knew it would make Lily's life even harder. But looking at my niece, seeing how desperately she needed something that was hers, something Rebecca couldn't erase or throw away, I couldn't refuse. We talked about it seriously first. I made sure she understood the consequences, that her mother would find out eventually, that things would get worse before they got better. Lily said she understood, but that she was tired of living in fear, tired of letting her mother's control dictate every choice she made. The shark piece took 3 hours to complete, wrapping beautifully around her forearm in shades of blue and gray. It was some of my best work, partly because I knew how much it meant to her, and partly because I wanted to give her something beautiful to hold on to during the ugly times ahead. Lily paid with cash she'd been hiding in a tampon box, the one place she knew her mother wouldn't look. She laughed about it, but it was sad that an 18-year-old had to hide money like contraband in her own home. She managed to keep it hidden for almost a week, wearing hoodies and long sleeves in the middle of summer, changing in the bathroom with the door locked. But Rebecca had become hypervigilant, suspicious of every movement Lily made. One evening, she burst into Lily's room without warning, armed with articles about tattoo infections and hepatitis that she'd printed from the internet. She was mid-lecture when she noticed Lily reflexively pulling down her sleeve and demanded to see her arms. The explosion when she saw the shark tattoo was unlike anything I'd ever heard described. According to Lily, Rebecca actually dropped to her knees and wailed like someone had died. She cried and raged and threatened everything from military school to involuntary commitment. She called Daniel home from a business trip, called her pastor, called everyone she could think of who might talk sense into her daughter. When none of that worked, when Lily stood firm and said the tattoos were her choice and she didn't regret them, Rebecca went nuclear. She got in her car and drove to my shop, and what happened next was caught on multiple security cameras and witnessed by dozens of people. I was cleaning my equipment after a long day when I heard the screech of tires outside. Through the window, I saw Rebecca's BMW jump the curb and slam into my parking lot so hard the whole car rocked. She got out looking like a woman possessed, her usually perfect hair wild, her makeup smeared from crying. She had her phone up, live streaming on Facebook, screaming to anyone who would listen that I was a predator who had marked her baby again. A couple walking by stopped to stare, and Rebecca turned on them, telling them to call the police because there was a child predator in their neighborhood. I had 2 clients still in the shop looking through design books, and they both immediately started looking uncomfortable. One grabbed their things and headed for the door, while the other pulled out their phone to record what was happening. I locked the door just as Rebecca reached it, and she started pounding on the glass so hard I worried it might shatter. She pressed her face against the window, spittle flying as she screamed accusations. Through the door, I could hear her telling her Facebook audience that I was hiding because I knew I was guilty, that I preyed on innocent children and marked them for trafficking. The trafficking allegation was so absurd I actually laughed, which only made her angrier. She started trying to shove her phone through the mail slot, still recording, still screaming. My remaining client looked terrified, and I apologized, explaining this was a family situation that had gotten out of hand. They were remarkably understanding, even offering to stay as a witness if I needed it. I called the police myself, figuring it was better to get ahead of whatever story Rebecca might tell them. While we waited for them to arrive, I pulled up Lily's consent forms on my computer, making sure I had all the documentation ready. I also texted Lily to warn her about what was happening. She replied that her mother had torn apart her room looking for evidence of more tattoos and that she was hiding at her friend Emma's house. My heart hurt thinking about what that poor girl was going through, all because she'd wanted to honor her dead friend and embrace her own interests. The police arrived within 10 minutes, and Rebecca immediately ran to them, phone still recording, claiming I was a dangerous predator. Officer Martinez, who I'd actually tattooed a memorial piece for a few years back, took one look at the situation and calmly asked Rebecca to put the phone down so they could talk. She refused, saying she needed to document everything for the safety of children everywhere. It took 2 officers to finally get her to stop recording and actually have a conversation. I showed Martinez all of Lily's paperwork, the security footage of her coming in alone and excited, the consent forms clearly showing she was 18. He looked through everything carefully, then went back outside to talk to Rebecca. I could see through the window as he explained that 18-year-olds were legal adults who could make their own choices about body modification. Rebecca's face went from red to purple as she screamed about parental rights and how the law was wrong. Martinez came back in and apologized for the disturbance, warning me that Rebecca seemed unstable and I should document everything in case she escalated further. He also mentioned that filing false reports was a crime, and if she kept claiming I was doing illegal things, she could face charges herself. I thanked him and started closing up the shop, my hands shaking from the adrenaline. My client, who had watched the whole thing, offered to write a statement about what they'd witnessed, which I gratefully accepted. That night, the videos of Rebecca's meltdown went viral in our local Facebook groups. Multiple people had filmed it from different angles, showing her jumping the curb, pounding on my windows, screaming wild accusations. The comments were brutal, but mostly in my favor, with people pointing out that she looked unhinged and that 18-year-olds could do whatever they wanted with their bodies. But Rebecca doubled down, commenting on every post that people didn't understand the full story, that I'd been grooming her daughter for years. The next morning, I woke up to 53 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Rebecca had spent the entire night contacting everyone she could think of, from distant relatives to my ink suppliers, trying to destroy my business and reputation. She'd called my landlord claiming I was running a drug operation. She'd contacted the health department saying my shop was unsanitary. She'd even reached out to other tattoo shops in town, warning them about associating with me. Most people saw through it, but some damage was already done. 2 of my suppliers called to say they'd have to put my accounts on hold until the situation was resolved, not wanting to be associated with any controversy involving minors. My landlord, thankfully, knew me well enough to laugh off Rebecca's claims, but he warned me that she'd offered him double my rent if he'd evict me. The fact that she was trying to literally buy my eviction was insane, but it showed how far she was willing to go. That's when other tattoo artists in the area started reaching out. They'd heard about what was happening and were appalled. Marcus from Ink Dreams, Sarah from Eternal Art, Diego from Northwest Tattoo Collective. They all offered support and started sharing my work on their pages. Within days, they'd organized a social media campaign with the hashtag #StandWithArtists, sharing stories about their own experiences with controlling parents, trying to dictate what legal adults could do with their bodies. The support was overwhelming and beautiful. Former clients started posting photos of their tattoos from my shop with stories about what they meant. Parents posted about how I'd helped their kids design meaningful memorial tattoos for lost loved ones. Teachers and nurses and lawyers and people from all walks of life shared how my art had helped them through difficult times or celebrated joyous ones. For every piece of hate Rebecca spread, there were 10 testimonies of the positive impact my work had made. But Rebecca wasn't done. A week later, I was served with legal papers. She was suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming I had deliberately targeted her daughter to cause the family harm. She was seeking $50,000 in damages, plus a restraining order that would prevent me from being within 500 feet of Lily. My stomach dropped reading through the lawsuit. If the restraining order was granted, even temporarily, it would mean I couldn't see my niece at all. couldn't help her escape the increasingly toxic situation at home. I immediately called a lawyer, Janet Chen, who specialized in cases involving bodily autonomy and parental overreach. She read through the lawsuit and actually laughed, saying it was one of the most frivolous cases she'd ever seen. But she warned me that Rebecca's money could drag this out and make my life miserable in the meantime. We would need to fight back hard and document everything. Janet told me to start gathering character witnesses and to make sure all my paperwork was impeccable going forward. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the next week, and I spent every waking hour preparing. I collected statements from clients, fellow artists, and community members. I organized every consent form I'd ever had signed, created a timeline of events, and compiled the security footage and witness statements from Rebecca's attack on my shop. Diego offered to testify about professional standards in the tattoo industry. Sarah wrote a letter about the importance of respecting legal adults' choices. Even my old mentor, who'd taught me the art 20 years ago, sent a character reference. The morning of the hearing, I put on my most conservative outfit, covered as many of my tattoos as possible, and tried to look like the responsible business owner I was, rather than the degenerate Rebecca painted me as. When I arrived at the courthouse, Rebecca was already there with not one, but 3 lawyers in expensive suits. She wore a demure dress and had styled herself to look like a grieving mother, complete with tissues she dabbed at her dry eyes. The courtroom was packed. Rebecca had brought members of her church as character witnesses, even though most of them had never met me. I recognized some faces from her Facebook videos, people who'd commented about protecting children from predators like me, but I also saw friendly faces, clients, and fellow artists who'd come to support me. Lily wasn't there, which worried me. Rebecca's lawyers claimed she was too traumatized to attend, which was complete nonsense. Rebecca took the stand first, and her testimony was a masterclass in manipulation. She painted herself as a devoted mother, trying to protect her daughter from a predatory uncle who'd been grooming her for years. She actually hired an expert witness, some supposed cult specialist, who testified that tattoo artists often mark vulnerable youth as part of trafficking rings. My lawyer objected strenuously, pointing out that this was inflammatory nonsense with no relevance to the case, but the damage was done. Several people in the gallery gasped and whispered. When it was our turn, Janet systematically destroyed Rebecca's case. She presented the consent forms, the security footage, the witness statements. She showed the judge Rebecca's social media posts, highlighting the defamatory nature of her accusations. She played the audio from Rebecca's voicemails, where she threatened to destroy my business and anyone who helped me. But the most damning evidence came when Janet showed the security footage of Rebecca keying my car before she even entered my shop that day, proving her actions were premeditated harassment. Rebecca actually stood up in court and claimed beast and shinid that the video Isimi was deep-faked, demanding forensic analysis. The judge, who had been patient until that point, finally showed irritation. He ordered Rebecca to sit down and warned her lawyers about making baseless claims. But because of the serious nature of the allegations involving a young adult, he granted a 2-week continuance to review all evidence, with a temporary restraining order in effect. This meant I couldn't contact Lily at all during that time, which was exactly what Rebecca wanted. Outside the courthouse, Daniel approached me in the parking lot. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in the past few weeks. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, even though I knew he'd quit years ago when Lily was born. He told me Rebecca had hired a private investigator to follow me and document everything I did. She was looking for any violation of the temporary order, any excuse to have me arrested. He also warned me that she was escalating at home, that Lily was basically a prisoner, and he didn't know how much longer he could stand by and watch. I wanted to shake him, to ask why he didn't stand up to his wife, why he let her terrorize their daughter. But I could see the defeat in his eyes. Rebecca had been controlling him for years too, just in different ways. He'd enabled her by staying silent, and now things had spiraled so far out of control he didn't know how to stop it. He asked me to be careful, said Rebecca had mentioned something about making sure I never tattooed anyone again, then hurried back to his car before she noticed he'd talked to me. The next 2 weeks were hell. My shop, which had already been struggling, was now almost empty. The few clients who did come were nervous, asking if it was safe, if there would be any incidents. 3 more one-star reviews appeared online, all claiming I tattooed children without consent. My afternoon appointments canceled one after another. Local news picked up the story after Rebecca gave them an interview about predatory tattoo artists targeting minors. And though they also interviewed me, they edited it to make the situation look more controversial than it was. I was taking out the trash behind my shop one evening when I heard glass breaking. I ran around front to find my window shattered. A brick on the floor with child predator painted on it in red. My security cameras had been spray painted black first, so there was no footage of who did it. My hands shook as I called the police and then Diego, who came over immediately to help me clean up and board the window. We both knew who was behind it, but without proof, there was nothing to be done. During this time, I couldn't contact Lily directly, but Daniel secretly kept me updated. She had filed her own restraining order against Rebecca, documenting years of emotional abuse and control. The courthouse security cameras had caught Rebecca lunging at her when she tried to file the paperwork, which only helped Lily's case. Rebecca was spiraling, calling relatives and family friends, trying to get them to intervene. She'd put out a $5,000 reward for information about Lily's whereabouts, as if her own daughter was a missing person rather than an adult trying to escape abuse. Our mother, who had initially sided with Rebecca, started to see the truth as more evidence came out. She called me one night, whispering because Rebecca was in the next room. She said Rebecca had been acting increasingly erratic, making wild accusations about everyone being part of a conspiracy against her. Mom had started recording their conversations after Rebecca threatened to have me killed if that's what it took to save Lily. That recording would later become crucial evidence. The day before our full hearing, my lawyer Janet called with good news. The forensic analyst had reviewed the security footage and confirmed it was authentic, not deep-faked, as Rebecca claimed. Additionally, the police had arrested the private investigator Rebecca hired after catching him trying to photograph me through my apartment window. He'd admitted Rebecca hired him to find anything that could be used against me in court. The pattern of harassment was clear and documented. On the morning of the full hearing, the courtroom was even more packed than before. Word had spread through the tattoo community and the artist rights groups, and people had come from as far as Portland to show support. Rebecca arrived looking haggard, her perfect facade finally cracking. Her expensive lawyers looked less confident than before, shuffling papers and whispering urgently. This time, Lily was there, sitting with my mother and looking determined despite the dark circles under her eyes. The judge had clearly reviewed all the evidence thoroughly. He started by addressing Rebecca's claims about trafficking and grooming, stating flatly that there was zero evidence to support such inflammatory accusations. He noted the pattern of harassment, the false police reports, the defamation, the property damage, and the attempted bribery of my landlord. His expression grew sterner as he detailed each instance of Rebecca's campaign against me. When Rebecca tried to interrupt, claiming she was just protecting her daughter, the judge's gavel came down hard. He reminded her that Lily was a legal adult who had filed her own restraining order against her mother, and that the court took patterns of controlling behavior very seriously. He then turned to the matter of my business losses, the defamation, and the emotional distress Rebecca had caused not just to me, but to her own daughter. The verdict was decisive. The judge dismissed all of Rebecca's claims against me and granted Lily's restraining order against her mother. He referred the case to the prosecutor for criminal charges, including harassment, filing false police reports, and attempted extortion based on the landlord's testimony. He also ordered Rebecca to pay damages for defamation and lost business, though the amount would be determined in a separate hearing. Rebecca's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She leaped to her feet, screaming that we'd all been brainwashed, that this was a conspiracy against good Christian mothers. As she ranted about the corruption of the legal system and how she was just trying to save her daughter, her legs suddenly gave out and she collapsed to the courtroom floor. The bailiffs called for medical assistance, while her lawyers tried to calm the situation. Even in that moment of chaos, I could see Lily's face, a mixture of concern for the mother who'd made her life hell and relief that it was finally over. The paramedics took Rebecca out on a stretcher while she continued to weakly protest that she was being persecuted for her faith. The judge cleared the courtroom, but not before making it clear that any violation of the restraining orders would result in immediate jail time. Outside, Daniel hugged Lily for the first time in weeks, tears streaming down his face as he apologized for not protecting her sooner. He looked at me over her shoulder and mouthed thank you, though we both knew he had a long way to go to make up for his years of enabling Rebecca's behavior. In the weeks that followed, the full extent of Rebecca's actions came to light. She'd been formally charged with multiple crimes, and the investigation revealed she'd spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to destroy me. She'd hired multiple private investigators, paid for fake reviews, even tried to bribe city officials to revoke my business licenses. The prosecutor told me it was one of the most extensive harassment campaigns they'd ever seen, all because her adult daughter had chosen to get tattoos. My business slowly started to recover as the truth spread. The tattoo community rallied around me, sending clients my way and sharing the real story on social media. Several young adults who'd been following the case came in specifically because they'd experienced similar controlling behavior from their parents and wanted to support someone who'd stood up against it. Each tattoo I did during that time felt like a small act of rebellion against those who would control others' bodies and choices. Lily moved into her own apartment with the help of some money from her grandmother and a part-time job. She finally had the space to grieve Jake properly and to figure out who she was without her mother's constant criticism and control. She started therapy to deal with years of emotional abuse and manipulation. The therapist helped her understand that Rebecca's behavior wasn't about love or protection, but about control and narcissism. It was hard work, but I could see Lily getting stronger every week. Daniel filed for divorce and sought emergency custody of their younger son, realizing finally that Rebecca's controlling behavior was damaging both children. The divorce proceedings were contentious, with Rebecca claiming alienation of affection and demanding alimony. But the criminal charges against her made it difficult for her to argue she was a fit parent or deserving spouse. The church that had been her power base for so long quietly removed her from all leadership positions after seeing the court documents. 6 months later, Rebecca was sentenced to 18 months in prison for the harassment and false reporting charges. The courtroom was much emptier this time, most of her supporters having abandoned her as the truth became undeniable. She stood before the judge, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that she was being persecuted for trying to save her daughter. The judge noted her complete lack of remorse and ordered mandatory psychological counseling in addition to the jail time. After the sentencing, Daniel, Lily, and I went to lunch at a little Vietnamese restaurant downtown. It was the first time in years we'd been able to enjoy a meal together without Rebecca's toxic presence. We talked about normal things, movies we'd seen, books we were reading, Lily's plans to study marine biology after all. She showed us her acceptance letter to the university, and Daniel actually cried with pride. He'd also started therapy and was working on understanding how he'd allowed Rebecca's behavior to escalate for so long. The financial settlement from the civil case came through a few months later. The $150,000 couldn't fully compensate for what Rebecca had put us through, but it helped. I used part of it to upgrade my shop and invest in better security. But more importantly, Lily and I decided to create a fund for young adults escaping controlling families. We called it the Freedom Foundation, and Lily designed a logo of chains transforming into birds taking flight. The foundation's first event was held at my shop on the first anniversary of Lily's initial tattoo. We offered discounted tattoos for anyone over 18 whose parents disapproved of their bodily autonomy. The response was overwhelming. Young adults lined up around the block, each with their own story of controlling parents, religious extremism, or family members who couldn't accept their choices. Local news covered it as a positive story about personal freedom and the importance of respecting adult children's autonomy. My mother surprised everyone by getting her first tattoo that day, at 68 years old. It was a small heart on her wrist containing the initials of all her grandchildren. She laughed as I worked, saying if Rebecca could see this, she'd probably have another breakdown. But Mom had finally understood that love meant accepting people as they were, not trying to force them into boxes of your own making. The tattoo was her way of showing she'd learned from the pain Rebecca had caused. Rebecca served 8 months of her sentence before being released on good behavior. But she couldn't help herself. Within a week, She was caught driving past my shop 4 times, taking photos and making obscene gestures at the windows. The security cameras I'd installed caught everything. Her parole officer didn't even hold a hearing, just sent her back to serve the full 18 months plus an additional 6 months for the violation. The district attorney later told me they'd rarely seen someone so unable to recognize their own destructive behavior. During Rebecca's incarceration, Lily flourished. She threw herself into her studies, maintained a high GPA, and even started teaching art workshops for teens dealing with loss and grief. Her shark tattoo had healed beautifully, and she'd added to it, creating an entire ocean scene down her arm. Each new element represented a step in her healing journey. The heart for Jake remained the centerpiece, but it was now surrounded by beauty and life, rather than standing alone in grief. Daniel found love again with a woman named Grace, who understood boundaries and encouraged both him and his son to be themselves. She was an artist herself, a potter who created these beautiful, imperfect pieces that celebrated their flaws rather than hiding them. Watching Daniel learn to appreciate art and creativity after years of Rebecca's rigid conformity was like watching someone learn to see color after a lifetime of black and white. His son Sam thrived in the new environment, free to explore his interests without fear of judgment. 2 years after that first tattoo, Lily had her first art show at a local gallery. The centerpiece was a massive painting showing her tattoos in detail, each one connected by flowing lines that told the story of her journey, from grief and control to freedom and self-expression. It sold to a collector who'd been following our story, someone who'd escaped their own controlling family decades earlier. They said the painting spoke to their experience in a way nothing else had. The ripple effects of our case spread beyond our family. The city council, prompted by the extensive harassment campaign against my business, passed legislation protecting service providers from harassment when serving legal adults. It became known informally as Lily's Law, though the official name was the Adult Autonomy Protection Act. It made it a specific crime to harass or threaten businesses that provide legal services to adults, regardless of parental approval. Rebecca had inadvertently created legal protections for countless others. My shop became known as a safe space for young adults seeking to express themselves despite family disapproval. I started hosting monthly support groups where people could share their stories and find community. We'd sit in a circle after hours, drinking tea and talking about the journey from family control to personal freedom. Some had tattoos, others just needed a space where their choices were respected. Lily often joined these sessions, sharing her story and offering hope to those still trapped. 3 years after everything began, I got a letter from Rebecca through her lawyer. She was out of prison and had moved to Arizona, claiming she wanted to reconcile and heal the family. The letter was full of religious language about forgiveness and moving forward, but nowhere did she acknowledge what she'd done or apologize for the pain she'd caused. She still painted herself as a victim, persecuted for her beliefs rather than prosecuted for her crimes. I threw the letter away without responding, as did Lily and Daniel. We learned through family channels that Rebecca had joined a new church in Arizona, telling them stories about her stolen family and the conspiracy that had torn them away from her. She'd started a blog about parental alienation, carefully omitting the crimes she'd committed and the restraining orders against her. But the internet doesn't forget, and people quickly found the real story. Her blog comments filled with links to news articles about the case, and she eventually had to shut it down. Meanwhile, life moved forward in beautiful ways. Lily graduated magna cum laude with her degree in marine biology. Her thesis on shark conservation won awards, and she landed a position at a prestigious research facility. At her graduation, she wore a sleeveless dress, proudly displaying the shark tattoo that had once caused so much conflict. Daniel cried through the entire ceremony, so proud of the strong, independent woman his daughter had become despite everything. Sam followed his own path, developing a passion for graphic design. On his 18th birthday, he came to my shop with a design he'd been working on for years, a compass rose with coordinates marking significant places in his journey. As I tattooed it on his wrist, he talked about how it would always remind him to follow his own direction, not someone else's map. Daniel took photos and posted them online with captions about being proud of his son's choices. a complete reversal from the man who once thought tattoos made someone less than. The Freedom Foundation grew beyond our wildest dreams. What started as a small fund to help young adults escape controlling families became a nationwide network of resources. We partnered with therapists, lawyers, and safe houses to provide comprehensive support. The Foundation's annual fundraiser, held at my shop each year on the anniversary of Lily's first tattoo, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Stories poured in from across the country of young adults who'd found the courage to claim their autonomy. My shop, once nearly destroyed by one woman's hate campaign, became a landmark in our community. Tour groups included it in their routes, telling the story of how one family's stand against control had changed laws and lives. The walls displayed not just tattoo designs, but also photos and letters from people who'd found freedom through our story. Every mark of ink was a declaration of independence, a permanent reminder that our bodies and choices belong to us alone. Lily kept adding to her tattoos over the years, each one marking a milestone or memory. The shark grew into an entire ocean sleeve, incorporating elements from her research and travels. She added a small compass near her wrist, coordinates marking the shop where she first claimed her autonomy. But the heart for Jake remained her favorite, weathered now and softened with age, but still bold and meaningful. She'd touch it sometimes during our family dinners, a quiet reminder of the friend whose death had inadvertently started her journey to freedom. Our family dinners were different now, held at Mom's house with Daniel, Grace, Sam, Lily, and whoever else wanted to join. The table was loud with laughter and debate, everyone free to be themselves without fear of judgment. We'd added new traditions, like everyone sharing one thing they were grateful for and one challenge they were facing. It was messier than Rebecca's controlled gatherings, but infinitely more honest and loving. Sometimes I thought about Rebecca alone in Arizona, clinging to her narrative of persecution, unable to see how her need for control had cost her everything. Part of me pitied her, trapped in a prison of her own making long after her physical incarceration ended. But mostly, I felt grateful that her extremism had forced us all to examine our own beliefs about family, control, and love. In trying to destroy us, she'd actually freed us to become who we were meant to be. The last time I saw Lily before she moved to California for a research position, she came by the shop for one final addition to her collection. It was a small phoenix on her shoulder blade, rising from ashes with wings spread wide. As I worked, she talked about how the hardest part of her journey wasn't the conflict with her mother, but learning to trust her own judgment after years of being told she couldn't. The phoenix represented not just survival, but transformation, becoming someone new while honoring who you'd been. When we finished, she looked at the completed piece in the mirror and smiled. Then she turned to me with tears in her eyes and said something I'll never forget. She thanked me not for the tattoos, but for being the one adult in her life who'd believed she had the right to make her own choices. In a family full of control and criticism, I'd offered acceptance and support. That, more than any ink, had given her the strength to claim her freedom. These days, my shop is busier than ever. I've hired 2 other artists and expanded into the space next door. We still get the occasional angry parent demanding we refuse service to their adult children. But now we have a laminated copy of Lily's Law posted at the front desk. Most leave quietly when they realize the law is on our side. Others stay and watch their children get tattooed, slowly learning that love means supporting choices even when you don't understand them. Every tattoo I create carries a story, but some echo louder than others. When young adults come in with controlling parents, when I see that familiar mix of determination and fear in their eyes, I think of Lily. I take extra care with those tattoos, knowing they represent more than art or decoration. They're declarations of independence, permanent marks of autonomy that no amount of control can erase. Each one is a small revolution, a choice made despite opposition, a step toward freedom. The freedom to choose what we do with our own bodies is fundamental, though some will always try to control others in the name of protection or faith or love. Rebecca taught us all what happens when that need for control becomes destructive, when love becomes possession and protection becomes prison. Her spectacular downfall serves as a warning to those who would override their adult children's autonomy. But more importantly, Lily's journey reminds us that we all have the right to write our own stories, in ink or otherwise. Looking back now, I'm amazed at how much changed because of a simple heart tattoo for a grieving 18-year-old. Laws were passed, families were restructured, and countless young adults found courage in our story. Rebecca's attempt to control her daughter's body had sparked a movement affirming everyone's right to self-expression. The shop she'd tried to destroy had become a symbol of resistance against those who would control others, and the family she'd tried to keep under her thumb had broken free and learned to truly love each other. Sometimes clients ask if I regret any of it, if I wish I'd just turned Lily away that first day to avoid all the drama. The answer is always no. Standing up to bullies is never easy, whether they're strangers or family. But every time I see someone leave my shop with new ink and newfound confidence, every time the foundation helps another young adult escape a controlling situation, every time I hear from someone who found courage in our story, I know it was worth it. Rebecca's harassment was the price of freedom, and in the end, freedom won. I often think about the moment everything truly began. That morning when Lily walked into my shop on her 18th birthday. She was nervous but determined, clutching the design she and Jake had created together. If I could go back, knowing everything that would follow, the lawsuits, the harassment, the family division, I'd still do exactly the same thing. Because what I saw in her eyes that day wasn't just grief for her lost friend. It was a desperate need to be seen, to be heard, to have one person in her life validate her right to make choices about her own body. The tattoo industry has changed because of what we went through. Artists across the country are more aware of the dynamics of controlling families and the importance of supporting young adults' autonomy. Many shops now have resources available for clients who might be escaping abusive situations. Some have even started funds similar to ours, creating a network of support that didn't exist before. It's incredible how one person's extreme behavior can catalyze positive change for so many. Daniel recently told me something that stuck with me. He said that for years he'd convinced himself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family together. He'd thought that by not confronting Rebecca's behavior, he was protecting everyone from conflict. But what he'd actually done was enable abuse and allow his children to suffer in silence. His journey to understanding this has been painful but necessary. He's become an advocate for other parents trapped in similar situations, sharing his story at support groups and online forums. Grace, his new partner, has brought such healing to their household. She's an art therapist who uses creativity to help people process trauma, and she's worked with both Sam and Daniel to understand how Rebecca's control had affected them. Watching Daniel learn to appreciate art after years of seeing it as worthless has been transformative. He recently commissioned a piece from Lily for their home, a watercolor of the ocean that represents their family's journey to freedom. He displays it proudly, something the old Daniel never would have done. The impact on the broader community has been remarkable. Our story sparked conversations about parental control and adult autonomy that hadn't happened before, at least not so publicly. Churches in our area started examining their teachings about parental authority and where the boundaries should be. Some congregations split over the issue, with progressive members advocating for respecting adult children's choices, while traditionalists maintained that parental authority never ends. These were difficult but necessary conversations. Several young adults have told me that hearing about our case gave them the courage to stand up to their own controlling parents. One young man, Marcus, came in last year wanting a memorial tattoo for his brother, who had died by suicide after years of religious abuse. His parents had threatened to disown him if he got it, but he'd read about Lily and decided his brother's memory was worth more than his parents' approval. 6 months later, his parents came around, realizing they'd rather have a son with tattoos than no son at all. The legal precedent set by our case continues to protect others. Just last month, a yoga studio owner contacted me because a parent was harassing her for allowing their 19-year-old to attend classes without permission. She cited Lily's law, and the harassment stopped immediately. A piercing studio across town used the same law when parents tried to shut them down for piercing their adult daughter's nose. The protection extends beyond body modification to any legal service provided to adults, from gym memberships to therapy sessions. Lily's journey in marine biology has been extraordinary. Her research on shark conservation has been published in major journals, and she's become a voice for ocean preservation. She often speaks about how nearly losing her dreams to her mother's control makes her more passionate about her work. Every achievement feels like a victory, not just for her, but for everyone who's been told their dreams don't matter. She keeps Jake's picture on her desk, a reminder of the friend whose death sparked her journey to freedom. The foundation we started has helped over 300 young adults in just 3 years. We provide emergency housing, legal assistance, therapy referrals, and financial support for those escaping controlling families. Each story is different but eerily similar. Parents who can't accept their children's autonomy, who use money, guilt, religion, or threats to maintain control. We've seen young adults disowned for everything from career choices to relationship decisions to simple aesthetic preferences like hair color or clothing style. One of our most successful programs pairs young adults with mentors who've escaped similar situations. Lily often mentors young women dealing with religious control, sharing her experience and offering hope. She tells them that the guilt and fear fade with time, that building your own life is worth the initial pain of separation. Many of these young people have never had anyone tell them their feelings and choices are valid. Providing that validation can literally save lives. We've also worked to educate parents about healthy boundaries with adult children. Not all controlling behavior is malicious like Rebecca's. Some parents genuinely believe they're protecting their children and can learn better ways to show love. We host workshops on transitioning from parent-child relationships to adult-adult relationships. It's not easy work, requiring parents to confront their own fears and need for control. But for those willing to do the work, it can heal families rather than destroy them. The art community has embraced our shop as a symbol of creative freedom. Local galleries often feature work from artists who've faced family rejection for their career choices. We host monthly art shows featuring everything from traditional painting to digital art to performance pieces. Each show celebrates the choice to pursue creativity despite opposition. The opening nights are always packed, full of people who understand what it means to choose art when your family calls it worthless. My own art has evolved through this experience. I used to focus mainly on technical skill, creating beautiful but safe designs. Now my work often incorporates themes of freedom, choice, and authenticity. I've developed a signature style that weaves personal narratives into visual designs. Clients come specifically for story tattoos, pieces that capture their journey in imagery. Each one is a collaboration, a visual autobiography etched in skin. The shop itself has become a pilgrimage site of sorts for people escaping controlling situations. We've had visitors from across the country who just wanted to see the place where someone finally said no to parental overreach. They take pictures with the framed news articles and the first dollar we earned after reopening. Some get small tattoos, tokens of their own journey to freedom. Others just want to talk, to be in a space where their autonomy is unquestioned. I've been invited to speak at conferences about bodily autonomy and professional ethics. It's strange being seen as an expert when I was just trying to help my niece. But I share our story because every telling might reach someone who needs to hear it. I talk about the importance of documentation, of standing firm in your professional ethics, of remembering that clients are individuals deserving of respect, regardless of family dynamics. The financial success following the lawsuit has allowed us to dream bigger. We're opening a second location next year, not just a tattoo shop, but a creative center offering art therapy, support groups, and legal clinics. Lily is designing the space to feel like a sanctuary, somewhere people can explore their identity without judgment. We're calling it the Freedom Arts Center, and it will be a place where creativity and autonomy intersect. Rebecca's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked control. From what we hear, she's never accepted responsibility for her actions. She's created an elaborate narrative where she's the victim of a liberal conspiracy to destroy traditional families. She speaks at small conservative gatherings about parental rights, carefully omitting the criminal convictions and restraining orders. But her audience shrinks each year as more people learn the real story. The saddest part is that she's missed so much of her children's lives. She doesn't know that Sam is designing video games that promote empathy and understanding. She doesn't know that Lily's research could help save entire ecosystems. She doesn't know that Daniel has become a better father through therapy and self-reflection. She chose control over connection and lost everything that actually mattered. Her rigid worldview couldn't bend, so it broke instead. Sometimes young clients ask me how to know if they're making the right choice in defying their parents. I tell them there's no universal answer, that each situation is unique, but I also tell them to trust their instincts, to notice if their parents' love feels conditional on obedience. Real love wants happiness for the loved one, even if that happiness looks different than expected. Control masquerades as love, but reveals itself through rigidity and punishment. The ripple effects continue to spread. A documentary filmmaker recently approached us about telling our story in a fuller format. They want to explore how one family's dysfunction led to systemic change. Lily is hesitant, not wanting to relive the trauma, but she's considering it if it might help others. The filmmaker has promised to focus on the positive outcomes, the lives changed, and families healed because we stood up to a bully. My relationship with my mother has deepened through this experience. She's had to confront her own complicity in Rebecca's behavior, the ways she enabled the control by prioritizing peace over justice. Her journey to understanding has been beautiful to watch. She now volunteers with the foundation, using her story to help other parents see how their silence can enable abuse. She tells them that keeping the family together isn't worth sacrificing your children's well-being. The legal team that supported us has become friends. Janet, my lawyer, says our case changed how she approaches family law. She's developed a specialty in autonomy cases, helping young adults navigate complex family dynamics while asserting their rights. She's won every case since ours, building on the precedents we set. She jokes that Rebecca was so outrageous, she made it easy to show why protections are needed. On quiet days in the shop, when I'm working on a particularly meaningful piece, I think about how art and autonomy intersect. Every tattoo is a choice to permanently alter your body, to claim it as your own canvas. For some, it's a small rebellion. For others, like Lily, it's a declaration of independence. The needle becomes a tool of transformation, marking not just skin, but moments of becoming. Each client leaves carrying their story made visible, unable to be erased by disapproving eyes. The holidays are different now, smaller but warmer. We gather at Mom's house, a chosen family of survivors and supporters. We share gratitude for freedom, for the ability to be ourselves without fear. There's laughter and debate and occasional disagreement, but it's all underlaid with respect for each person's autonomy. No one dictates what others should do or be. Love means acceptance, not control, and we've all learned that lesson the hard way. As I write this, I'm preparing for the 4th annual Freedom Day at the shop. It's become our biggest event, with artists from across the region donating their time. We offer free tattoos to young adults who've escaped controlling families, each piece a celebration of autonomy. The line starts forming at dawn, full of people ready to mark their freedom permanently. Local news covers it positively now, a far cry from the early coverage of Rebecca's accusations. The foundation has grown beyond anything we imagined. We have chapters in 12 cities, each adapting our programs to local needs. Some focus on religious control, others on cultural expectations, but all center on supporting young adults' right to make their own choices. We've helped people escape arranged marriages, conversion therapy, financial abuse, and countless other forms of control. Each success story reminds us why this work matters. Looking back over these years, I see how Rebecca's extremism revealed fault lines that already existed. Families across the country have had to examine their dynamics, to question whether their love comes with conditions. Some have grown stronger through honest communication. Others have fractured, but perhaps those breaks were necessary for individual growth. You can't build healthy relationships on foundations of control. Lily sends me updates from California, where she's thriving in her research. She's presenting at international conferences, her work on shark habitats gaining recognition. She recently got engaged to a fellow researcher who loves her exactly as she is, tattoos and all. They're planning a beach wedding next year, and she's asked me to design commemorative tattoos for the wedding party. Jake will be there in spirit, in the heart tattoo that started everything. The shop continues to evolve, adding new artists and expanding services. We offer scar coverage for abuse survivors, medical tattoos for people reclaiming their bodies after illness, and memorial pieces for grieving families. Each service connects to our core mission of bodily autonomy and personal expression. The walls hold thousands of stories now, a testament to human resilience and the power of choice. Sometimes I run my fingers over my own tattoos, each one a marker of my journey. The rose for my grandmother who taught me to be strong. The phoenix for surviving Rebecca's attacks. The compass rose pointing toward freedom. My skin tells my story in a language beyond words. That's what Rebecca never understood. Tattoos aren't about rebellion or corruption. They're about claiming your narrative, writing your truth in permanent ink. The impact statement Lily wrote for Rebecca's sentencing hangs framed in our office at the foundation. In it, she thanks her mother for showing her exactly who she doesn't want to be. She writes about learning strength through opposition, finding her voice by having it silenced. It's a powerful document, full of pain transformed into purpose. She ends by saying she'll pray for her mother to find peace, but from a distance, protected by law and geography. As the 10th anniversary of that first tattoo approaches, we're planning something special. A retrospective art show featuring work from everyone involved in our story. Lily's paintings, Sam's digital art, even Daniel's first attempts at pottery under Grace's guidance. The theme is transformation, how conflict can catalyze growth if we let it. All proceeds will go to the foundation, continuing the cycle of support that began with one young woman's desire to honor her friend. I still see echoes of our story in every controlling parent who walks into my shop, every young adult torn between autonomy and approval. The details change, but the dynamics remain consistent. Fear masquerading as love, control disguised as protection, conditional acceptance that isn't really acceptance at all. But I also see the solution in every successful intervention. Every family that learns to respect boundaries, every parent who chooses connection over control. The truth is, Rebecca gave us all a gift, though she'd hate to know it. By being so extreme, so unreasonable, so obviously wrong, she made it impossible to ignore the issues of control and autonomy. She became the cautionary tale that helps others recognize toxic patterns before they escalate. Her complete inability to see her own fault makes her the perfect negative example. In trying to control everyone, she freed us all. When I lock up the shop each night, I pause to appreciate what we've built from the ashes of Rebecca's destruction. A business that champions autonomy, a foundation that supports the vulnerable, a family that truly loves without conditions. The shop she tried to destroy has become a beacon of hope for those seeking freedom. The daughter she tried to control has become a voice for conservation and science. The family she tried to dominate has learned to thrive in her absence. This story could have ended so differently. If I'd turned Lily away that day, if Daniel had continued to enable Rebecca, if the legal system hadn't recognized the abuse, if any number of small moments had gone differently. But they didn't. We stood firm, supported each other, and refused to let one person's need for control destroy our lives. That's the message I want everyone to hear. You have the right to autonomy, to make choices about your own body and life, to be supported in your journey to become yourself. The young woman who came to my shop today reminded me so much of Lily 9 years ago. Same mixture of determination and fear, same story of parents who couldn't accept her choices. As I prepared her design, a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, she told me she'd been following our story since high school. It had given her hope that she could survive her family's rejection, that there was life beyond their control. As the needle touched her skin, beginning the transformation she'd chosen, I thought about all the lives changed because one grieving girl wanted to honor her friend. Freedom isn't free, as the saying goes, but the price of autonomy is worth paying. Every person who walks through our doors makes that calculation, choosing self-expression over others' approval. Rebecca taught us all what happens when that balance tips too far toward control. Her spectacular fall from power serves as a warning and a promise. A warning to those who would control others, and a promise to those seeking freedom that they're not alone. As I finished telling this story, Lily texts me a photo from her research vessel. She's smiling in the sunshine, her tattoos visible and proud, living the life she almost lost to her mother's control. The heart for Jake catches the light, still bold after all these years. She's exactly who she was meant to be, not despite the conflict, but because she survived it. That's what freedom looks like, a young woman on the ocean, following her dreams, marked by her choices, and stronger for her struggles.